There we go. And I just heard it on 14 other people's desktops. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us for another edition of Ansible Nova Virtual Edition, Ansible Northern Virginia. I am Eric Updegrove. I'm the General Manager of Fierce Software Corporation. Fierce Software is an enterprise open source value-added reseller. And since we deal in technologies that are enterprise open source, and we don't have any software ourselves to give back, hosting events like this, doing free workshops, free trials, free all kinds of stuff is our way of Fierce Software giving back to the community, upstream users. We have, I have a slide for this. Why don't I go ahead and click next here? Oh, there we are. Fierce Software, that's us. You can see some of the enterprise open source partners that we work with. These are also our cohorts in supporting Ansible Nova. This evening, we have the folks from Anchore with us. On a typical week, we may have some of the folks from Red Hat with us. Some of the original Ansible folks have joined us. You see MindPoint Group up on this slide. If you've been with us before, you've seen presenters from all of these companies. I'm going to be getting into our agenda for this evening in a couple of slides, but speaking of Anchore, you do see Saïd up in the little square diagram, whatever is in front of your screen. You see Graham joining us. You see Angela, maybe a couple, but those are the three that I see right now. From Fierce Software, we have Lizzie Glenzer. I see plenty of familiar faces. I saw Joel. I saw Mr. Jaycox. I saw Paul Mafinsky and Ivan. I see Mr. Kennedy as well, Olivia. Thank you guys for being loyal and sticking with us through these virtual meetings and contributing members of Ansible Nova. Really do appreciate it. Here's my commercial. And if you're with us 2 weeks ago, you remember this slide. Big push for Red Hat training. And as the business runner of Fierce Software, just put quite a bit of coins into our brand new Red Hat training web store. You can find that on fiercesw.com/shop/c/red-hat. You're going to want to write that one down. Check it out after the fact. Drop me an email, drop my team members an email if you want to take a look at any sort of discounted pricing. If your company is asking that you stay fresh on your accreditations, or you're doing it for just your own personal journey, we're happy to help you there. What else do we have? We have prizes this evening. All right. What we're going to do is put a link in the chat. There it is, fiercesw.com/free candy. That may get you put on a marketing list, but we're not too intrusive. What it will do is get you put on the list for this evening. You will receive a Fierce t-shirt. You can see it in front of you. They're awesome. I have like 16. Wear them to the gym. They're very soft.
They are awesome. Yeah.
Concurrence from the crowd. Thank you. We'll send you a Fierce t-shirt, and we'll also put you on a list to receive AirPods. So basically, anyone who signs up this evening, we're going to spin the wheel of all the entries, and everyone will get a free t-shirt, and one person will receive a free pair of AirPods Pro. And we'll get that mailed out to you. The link asks for your address, so if you are selected, we'll buy them on Amazon, send them out to you. My final slide. Thank you again, and thank you to Saïd for joining us. In this evening's topic, Saïd will be presenting from Ansible to Anchore. I had to check my notes for 4 words. Ansible, Saïd's the former CEO of Ansible. He's the current CEO of Anchore. So he's by far probably the singular person to present the topic of Ansible to Anchore. I'm very excited about it. I think our group is pretty excited about it. I think we should be going for about 30, 45 minutes based on what Saïd will be presenting. As always, Q&A, put it in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it and try and address those after the fact. This is the end of my commercial. I'm going to stop presenting. Hand the baton over to you, Saïd. Saïd, thank you for joining us. Our friend Anchore, thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Eric. Thank you, Lizzie, for having me. Really appreciate it. Let me just put this up so you guys can see it. Let me know if you can. Is this working okay? Can you see? Awesome. That's great. Sorry. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Lizzie. Appreciate you having me today. I'm excited to share so many great stories. And I just love thinking about some of the old days within Ansible and how we got started and where it is today. It's amazing how back when we kicked this off in 2013, it was a 1,000 lines of Python code, if I remember right, and about 5 pages of documentation, and that was all of Ansible. In fact, the writing of Ansible, the code itself, was done by Michael DeHaan, who started this as a side project back in 2012. And so fast forward 5 years or 7 years, and here we are now, where Ansible has taken hold of IT automation across the globe, picking up top 10 most active projects, most active open source projects in the world. So just a great success story, and I can't wait to share some of those elements with all of you. And thanks everybody for coming in today. Just before I start, I wanted to give everybody just some colors about who I am, what I've been, and how I ended up at Ansible. So background, I was born and raised in Casablanca, Morocco. I moved to Boston when I was 18 to go to school there. I finished my college degree there with both my bachelor's degree in EE and master's in computer engineering. And then I was a software engineer for a good part of 7 or 8 years. In fact, the first company I worked for was Polaroid Corporation. Outdates most of you guys today. And that was early 90s. And then after 7 years of software development, I moved into the business side, and that's when I latched onto Red Hat, 1999, 2000. And that's back when Red Hat was selling mugs and T-shirts, if any of you guys remember. So magazines and so it was the idea of a Red Hat Enterprise Linux or OpenShift or anything in between hasn't surfaced yet. So it was just this idea of, we were struggling back then to just make sense of what is open source and why do you need to buy open source, and how unsafe is it, and what indemnification you need to have in place, and what's the IP warranty that you need. So none of the elements that you guys discussing today, where open source has become a standard for compute in totality. So in fact, we were outing with Red Hat back in the days, and we went canoeing, and the guy who was managing that camp said, "So what do you guys do?" And somebody jumped in and said, "Yeah, we sell free software." And the guy goes, "Yeah, that must be hard." And said, "Yes, it is." So anyways, Red Hat for about 10 years, from, like I said, the early days up to when it became a Fortune 1000 company, doing about $1 billion in sales. So it gave me a sort of an awesome journey of learning both open source, enterprise, and everything else. And so after Red Hat, joined a company for about a year and a half or so called Eucalyptus, early on-prem cloud company based here in the West Coast. So I moved from Boston to Santa Barbara. And then while there, and this is sort of how that whole Ansible thing was starting to take shape. So while at Eucalyptus, I think a lot of what Eucalyptus did back in the days had something to do with IT automation. So there's a lot of sort of Chef and Puppet, BMC, CA, a lot of these early IT automation shops. And I think it became clear and clear that there is definitely an opportunity for disruption. There was some complexity in there that didn't need to be in there. So that was in the back of my mind while at Eucalyptus. So thinking through it, late 2012, we noticed Ansible. Actually, one of the first adopters of Ansible, open source project, like I said, still very early stage, still just about 1,000 lines of Python code, was App Dynamics. So, and it was more of a sort of a project like internally at AppD. So reached out to AppD and talked to them about Ansible and came back just thinking about how disruptive this technology could be at the end, which has to do with this idea of stage-based and agent, YAML-based playbooks, the idea to do all things through a sysadmin versus having to go to core developers and pull them into doing IT automation. So a lot of those elements sort of made sense to me at that point. So reached out to the original founder, or the guy who wrote the initial software, the project itself, and asked him if he'd be interested in actually pulling this through into a company. And he said, yeah, in fact, he was thinking about it, but the project was too small at that point. And he has talked to some others, and it was very early stage. And the general feedback was, the market is already overcrowded. You've got Puppet and Chef that have been around 6 or 8 years. You've got BMC has been around since the early 90s. So why try to get into this space while it's still too crowded? So some of that pushback. So we went in. He decided he agreed to come on board as a co-founder and a CTO, and we started Ansible in 2013. Pulled in Tim Gerla, who's also a co-founder, and he was with me at Eucalyptus. And that's when it was just first started taking shape. So raised about $1 million in seed round, and then started the journey right then. And so when we talked to people back in the days about this, and again, it's just the headwind coming in from all these different vendors, and there's just no way Ansible could be a thing just by the mere factor that it's just too many out there. It was enough to actually pull back and say, maybe we made a mistake. But then we just kept going through. In fact, just like what we're having today on this webinar, our first Ansible Fest was in Boston in 2013, literally three months after we launched, and it had about 35 people in that gathering, and it was enough for us to say, okay, this is a thing. We have enough people that see value, and they all sort of had a story about how they're using Ansible and how they're potentially displacing what was in place at that point within their organization. So it was exciting enough to give us that next sort of wind in the sail for the next venture, for the next journey. So we raised capital shortly after, I think it was May or June or July, excuse me, with Menlo Ventures, and that was a $5 or $6 million, and that was the start of Ansible. So most of you guys already know this, but the Ansible story, the Ansible brand itself, Ansible as a name came from Ursula Le Guin, if you guys are into sci-fi, and the book I think was Ender's Game. Anyway, so it came up. We were excited about Ansible as a name. We started sort of thinking about how we're gonna do a trademark and how we're gonna brand it, all of that. And so come to find out, a Fortune 500 based in Europe actually had an Ansible project, and they would not give it to us as part of trademark. So it was a good part of a year's fight to try to figure out a way to get that Ansible brand and Ansible trademark in place. And we finally did, and we're pretty excited about it. And then the second thing is just the idea of the branding itself. Branding took a good solid 3 months. The company called Newkind is actually based in North Carolina, spent a decent amount of time just putting what that Ansible is going to look like, the short brand, the short form logo, the long-term form logo, and everything about it, everything about Ansible had something to do with sci-fi, and I think we try to maintain that logic going through. So even Ansible Tower, you can imagine, has some effect there. Galaxy, where we all stored the playbooks for maintenance and for augmentation, was also sort of sci-fi note. So a lot of it had to do with this excitement of building a sci-fi like. And Ansible itself, if you didn't know, stands for an object that can communicate, or a model that can communicate between two objects instantaneously. I think in the book itself it says faster than the speed of light, which is against all things physics that we have learned over the years. But the note itself is just that Ansible logo and branding had a lot of really goodness to it. It just had a really good story for you guys who are planning to write your own name on the door at some point and building your own company. It just this early stage investments of actually building a brand that makes sense to you, that resonates, a logo that you can actually build the story behind is just very important. So with that, I think once we're locked in on the logo and the brand, and we start having fun with it. So one of the note was, somebody said, "Hey, you know, there are some people that can't remember Ansible as a name," kind of thing. So we're just playing with that. And one of the funny jokes was, early days, one way to remember Ansible is to actually think of Aunt Sybil. And so that became a joke, like, have you used Ansible, like Ansible, as in Ansible? The other one was Ansible. So Cowsay, as you remember, is a big thing with Ansible early days. So we said Ansible instead, it's Ansibull. A lot of that sort of fun jokes around how you could potentially remember Ansible. So just a little background on Ansible. I hope that was helpful. I mean, fast forward, like I said, 7 years, and here we are. Ansible deployed not just on the compute side, but also on the network gear, and it's used across the globe. And I can just tell you that the notes that I got just from being part of founding team and running the show back in the days was just a great journey for me personally. And my daughter was in London recently in school, and she was at the airport, and some person was carrying a luggage that had an Ansible tag to it. And so she texted me and said, "Hey, Dad, I just saw somebody with an Ansible bag." So it's pretty cool. So let me just stop there for a second. Is that helpful? Any questions there with Ansible?
Hey, Saïd, I remember the old swag pre-Red Hat was the Black Bulls.
Yes.
Is that because of the play on the answer? That was just purely because bull is in the phonetic pronunciation?
Absolutely.
I still have one.
And that's when Jim Whitehurst at Red Hat was caught holding one of those Ansibles and making a play with it too, because it caught on fire too. Everybody just loved the story, and I think it might have been as squishy as well. Okay.
You got to keep them away from the dogs, but that's good.
Sure. Anyway, so that was Ansible. The Ansible sort of the biggest value prop back in the days is this idea of a radically simple IT automation tool, meaning so moving away from having to. It was so simple. It actually became boring to the IT team. And that's where we wanted it. We did not want it to be front and center. We want it to be in the background, doing what it needs to do to help facilitate deploying and managing your infrastructure the best you could. So that increased speed, that increased speed, that allowed for management of IT a lot better than than before. So that transition into Anchore was sort of similar. So while IT automation space was ripe for disruption back in the days, I felt, while at Ansible actually, that the whole security space was ripe for disruption too, and in a way that goes beyond just your typical runtime sort of behavior detection, network security, and remediation. It had something to do with security itself had to change to a way that is more posture versus operation. And so we started thinking about it. Then Nurmi, who's with me at Eucalyptus, and I just left Eucalyptus as well. So we're just talking about what that could potentially be. The sort of the driving factor was this idea of the whole cloud native thing was coming about. So you got containers starting to take shape, and this space was hot. Docker Inc. Was pushing that agenda forward with the open source and with Docker Hub and everything else. And so we just always thought that, okay, so cloud native as a wave was taking shape, and there's industry backing for it. So that's moving forward. There's a lot of interest. We know that that's going to be the future of compute. At the same time, we saw that security itself was lagging. Sort of the runtime security was becoming more and more. It's more archaic than you can think about. Meaning, it wasn't sort of keeping up. Cloud native was going fast. The security was sort of holding back, still sort of stuck in the old days. So we knew that there's a play in there. So we combined the two. It started as what we called container security, quote unquote. We did not want to do anything on runtime. We did not want to do anything on the SCM side around source code. We just wanted to focus strictly on artifacts, on the sort of the DevOps side of that journey. And just ensuring that we have the best possible story in the security space. So that was sort of the reason for starting Anchore. We really wanted to build something that is different in security, that is part of the movement of cloud native. That was the, so we're cloud native, and we're just about this idea of a shift left or an SDLC, security and compliance. So again, we use the same branding team, New Kind, to build Anchore. Did it Ansible for us, did it Anchore for us. If you look at the Anchore long form logo, and you look into it, you'd see that it's almost like something floating in an ocean of sort. And so there's cut out into different letters that are a lot for that kind of visual. But back in the days, in 2015, there was this maritime concept around everything Docker. Right? So it's just, get this and get that. I think one of the things we wanted to think through is this idea of bringing an anchor to your way you look at security in your pipeline. And so Anchore is a sort of derivative of anchor, although misspelling can be quite dramatic sometimes, or mispronouncing, excuse me. But that was sort of the gist behind having that specific name or that branding itself. All right, so that was Ansible, and then the transition to Anchore and why we moved to Anchore. So fast forward 3 to 4 years, and what you're thinking, what had started as sort of creating a security umbrella or augmenting your runtime security into the shift left with developers and with ops team has now transpired into this supply chain security, which is supply chain as a concept has been around forever, from cars to everything else. But the idea of a software supply chain is sort of newish in the way that we're dependent more and more on third party than we ever have been in the past. Think of it as, now it's not only just ISVs, libraries that we're dependent on to build our apps, but we're also dependent on things like private registries and public registries and everything in between. And so supply chain is an issue as far as maintaining that constant checks across the board for not just your app, but everybody else. The recent SolarWind breach is a catalyst to this. So imagine it's just a single company SolarWinds, but because their product is obviously shared into 20,000 other organizations, all of those organizations have been affected to one level or another. So, and this is just the start. I mean, this is just beginning of how bad this whole thing can be. And so, while runtime need and for detection and remediation, while network security is still a big thing, it's just not enough. So augmenting or broadening the view of your security outside of just runtime and into the sort of the software supply chain, SDLC, is very, very critical now. You could be sane on that one side, but you would have major issues if the hacker himself or herself comes in on the supply chain side, which is very likely. So imagine where you have, maybe I have these in the slides somewhere, but imagine where you have these dependencies on libraries, but those libraries have dependencies themselves. So there's this transitive effect that can go 3 to 300 levels that you have absolutely no control of. So the question is, how do you manage security and compliance for all of that ecosystem when all you care about is just building your app? So supply chain itself is anything that actually influences or comprises your software application. So it's not just the workflow, but it's also the infrastructure, the platform, right? So you get the platform, you get this is where Ansible plays in fact. So infrastructure as code, and managing that in the way you could manage apps sort of plays right into the security as well. So we're bringing that level of automation into it, where you can manage, you can automate your apps, and you can automate your infrastructure or platform, and you can create security checks across all of these before it goes into production. So today, there's over 80%, according to Gartner, by 2025, they're going to be either deploying containers inside of their infrastructure or selling software that is built into containers. So this is sort of, if you look back just in today or a couple of years ago, it was in the 25 to 35%, growing fast. So this is definitely, there's reason to go to containers. The problem with it is that with containers, there's just a complexity level that gets magnified to levels haven't been seen before. Like I mentioned earlier, your concern had always just been around your application, with the occasional library inclusion that has to be part of an ISV. But now with containers, you just got this ease of use of being able to pull containers from 500 different hubs out there, and mostly open source, and being able to deploy some of that. It's the idea of participation, the idea of leverage, and this all to maximize the pace of innovation. But with that comes this problem of okay, well, so how secure are these things? And so security now is obviously top priority for all CISOs and all companies because of what we have seen. I mean, every other week you get a major breach one way or another. Difference between runtime security and supply chain security is that with runtime, you get some fencing. So you can actually build detection across where it can give you a pretty good read on how you can best secure that operation. On the shift left, you don't have that luxury. You got things coming in from disparate sources across from everywhere, and so it becomes really a problem maintaining that kind of transparency, visibility, and insurance before it goes into production. In fact, one thing I wanted to mention here is that this idea of a pull from both cloud native and security is actually shown in the companies that have gone public in the recent days. So if you look at, for example, Synopsys, which was formed, I think, back in late 80s and early 90s, at a market valuation of some 30 something, or market capitalization of some 30 billion. And then you get even Palo Alto, that's only as recent as 2005, I think it was, or 2007. And market valuation there is just about the same. And then you see CrowdStrike, which is all about edge security, and it's all cloud native, and it's barely 10 years old. And it actually surpassed both in market capitalization. So the reason I'm saying this is that the pull for all of cloud native based security is real, because the risk has become that much bigger, and the risk of attacks is now, we can see it on a regular basis, and it's not, and the cost of it is high. Meaning, it's not that you have to give up on the runtime security; it's still important, but you have to have a supply chain security plan, whether that's an augmentation, whether it's a broadening, whether it's whatever it is, you have to have both in your data set. This is more of just just staying with the sort of the runtime security. The idea is that it's a higher cost, it's delaying project, and I think based on research made by Gartner again, there was 50 to 75% cost hike sticking to just runtime security. So this idea of pulling things left is now showing that it has its value, that can get applications out faster, and that can get the cost of these applications out lower as well. Eric, I'm not looking at the chat, but if there's any questions that come up, just let me know. All good?
Yep. Seems like we're all good.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yep. Awesome, great. So how's Anchore doing it today? So the idea of securing a software supply chain is easily said and done, but we've been at this for 4 good years. And it's just building this concept of a continuous automated check or validation across your pipeline. So from sourcing containers and libraries and artifacts and config files and everything you need, all the way up to deploying and running your application. So Anchore has built a platform that allows for simple, easy integration into the developer workflow, into the sort of the build workflow, so that one thing we've always been mindful of is developers are focused on building apps and building them fast and building them well. And so they don't want to get distracted by having to check into a security workflow. They just want to keep building because that's their mandate. Because security has always been somebody else's issue. Now we're asking ops and potentially developers to be involved early on. And so the way to do that is to actually integrate this very easily, very simply, similar to what Ansible has done on the IT automation side. So we're doing this where we through an API, a simple API, integrate Anchore into the workflow and allow for continuous checks across. So think of it as a critical bug of sorts. So security relevance now becomes, if there is a miss, if there is a check that comes back negative, that's just yet another critical bug that we have to worry about. The problem is with bugs, it's sort of compartmentalized into maybe one company or 2 companies. With a security bug, once it infiltrates, it could affect thousands of companies. So we're trying to instill this educational effect of telling ops team and DevOps team and developers that Anchore can fit into your workflow. You don't have to worry about sort of the level of integration because it's simple. And then at the end of the day, you'll have this constant validation and gives you sort of a better sense of security. So what we do is it's a deep and wide. We're actually not just looking at existing vulnerabilities, but we're looking at things like secrets left behind. We're looking at things like misconfigurations, blacklists, whitelists, and everything in between. And not only that, but we're also adding a policy engine on top of it, to both that has an external and an internal compliance effect, whether it's NIST or CIS, but an internal compliance engine that allows for you to add your own sort of policy rules that are specific to your own organization. This is one of the sort of the key things for DoD, which is part of the inside threat detection, is the ability to actually name and build these custom policies to check for deviations from the norm. So that's how Anchore has been able to fix or to address this issue. Like I said before, this is still the first inning in a sort of a 20, 30-year play. This is just the first couple of years of what is DevOps security, what is workflow security, what is software supply chain security, what is the shift left thingy, what is, all of those questions are just being answered little by little. So this is just the start. Some of the customers we have, Fortune 100 companies, from Cisco to eBay to NVIDIA, Twilio, they're all sort of seeing this early adopters, sort of seeing the effect of managing or detecting issues earlier in the life cycle. And just like with Ansible, you know, if you just had 5 web servers and 3 data servers, that it's easy to manage. But when that multiplies to thousands of servers, this is where Ansible comes into play. Similar with Anchore. So if you have to just check in a sort of well-contained small workflow, that's one thing. But when you're a Fortune 100 deploying in 100 data centers with 5,000 developers, that becomes a real problem. So the scale factor becomes an issue. So as far as integrating with the DevOps vendors or DevOps technologies, very important for Anchore to have a seamless integration into not just your CI/CD, but also your image registries, whether it's JFrog by Factory, or whether it's Red Hat Square, or whether it's Harbor, or it's Azure, AWS. Container orchestration, as far as an admission controller into Kubernetes or into runtime. Anchore can integrate into Kubernetes or any derivation of that, whether it's OpenShift or Anchore or anything else. So this idea of being able to integrate with all these tools is incredibly important, because most of these Fortune 1000 companies want a single standard security tool that can apply to all of these different technologies. Like I said, where it's within Apple, you can have a team here in the US using Jenkins or using GitLab, and a team in Europe using Jenkins, and a team in Asia using Circle CI. So it could be all these, but all of them have to communicate in a common standard to allow for the security team and the compliance team to have a consistent story for security across all of these disparate sort of business unit all across different Fortune 1000 companies. So that was very important for us to actually have this kind of API coverage across all these vendors. So I'm running a little late, but just a couple of use cases. DoD today, Air Force is using Anchore as a standard for doing exactly what we talked about. And this idea of a DevSecOps initiative, and if you guys haven't seen it, it's Eric, you might have already done this, but there's some guides that have already been made public. Pretty awesome. DISA and DoD collaborated and built this just great guide of how to build the right DevSecOps platform. And they've used it. It's now starting to cross-pollinate over to the enterprise side. And there's just so much data in it, and it's really cool. Anchore is actually smack down in the middle. We're being used to do hardening and enforcement of policies before these containers get into the container registry or the repository for the DoD. So any vendor, there's about 170 or so containers or applications or vendors that need to go through this same one process before they can actually get certified. And these are commercial off the shelf, government off the shelf, and all the open source software out there. So great use case. It's public. You guys can have access to it in the public domain, and we're happy here at Anchore to answer questions. The other is NVIDIA. NVIDIA has this idea of a curated software catalog for their NGC, which is NVIDIA GPU cloud. And so all of NVIDIA's vendors have to certify across before they can actually be used in the NGC container or catalog. And Anchore is used exactly for that. So we have policies that have actually been derived to meet this sort of need for both NVIDIA as well as DoD. So many other case studies that you guys can tap into in our website from Fortune 500 companies, et cetera. So that was sort of very high level. I hope this was useful. I'm happy to answer any questions.
You guys can either unmute yourselves to ask Saïd a question, or feel free to put them in the chat as well if you don't want to unmute yourself, but either way.
Any questions from either of the A vendors, Ansible or Anchore? I don't have a question while we're waiting, Saïd, but I did have an anecdote. You were mentioning some of the funny places we've seen. You saw your daughter saw the Ansible logo. I do have those luggage tags too, by the way. And I texted my wife while you were talking. I said, "Send me a picture of the Roomba."
Did she?
And because I'm sitting here at my desk, and so she doesn't know why. She doesn't know why she sent me a picture of our Roomba, but that's it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. I do have, in fact, I'm not sure if they're still doing this, Eric, but I still have some of the old.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I don't know if they're still doing them, but if any of you guys need one of these, let me know, because I have about 500,000.
They are still doing those.
Sorry, I missed that.
They are still doing them.
Oh, they are still, okay, great. That's great.
But those ones that you have, I think, are bigger. I've seen the Red Hat version, and there's a slight difference.
They are big. Yeah, these are the bigger ones. You're absolutely right. Now, by the time I think Ansible got acquired by Red Hat, we were just about 65 people, I want to say, and the majority of the team was based in Durham, North Carolina. So just a little bit of tidbit for you guys.
Yeah, I remember some of the folks in the room were helping Fierce to put together an Ansible training, a 4-day paid enterprise training, and then the acquisition occurred, and we brought them our Git repo and said, "Look what we have," and Red Hat said, "Thanks, we've got this. We got it from here."
No, Eric. Because Red Hat used our labs. They deconstructed our labs to build the Ansible course that they converted afterwards.
Oh, there's so many stories like that out there. It's just.
I think Eric needs to include Anchore and Ansible stickers with the free candy.
Yes.
It should be free candy and stickers.
I'm in charge of packing those, so we have plenty of Ansible stuff in the office. I actually have an Ansible luggage tag that is on a suitcase that I am packing right now for my weekend trip. So I think those are limited edition now, though. We may have to keep those as a giveaway.
That's dropping a hint for Graham, saying we need Anchore luggage tags.
Let's do it.
There we go.
And
stickers.
That's
And
the popular thing, I guess. Yeah.
Done.
All right, Angelo, you heard it. We're good.
Well, I don't know if anyone's brave enough to ask questions, but we do have some folks hanging around, and we do have a pair of Apple AirPod Pros to give away. Lizzie, do you
Yeah,
have
so
some kind
if you want, oh, my camera's not even on. If you guys want to enter that, or just to get swag, we are going to be sending swag to everybody who puts their information in the free candy link that I have in the main chat. Normally we would just have a table at these events in person where you could grab it and go, but you know, in this situation we'll be mailing it to you. So be sure to put your information in there. If you want a t-shirt, some stickers, we'll throw anything Ansible we have in there for you guys. And I have names in my little thing right here to draw. So if anybody wants to enter it, we can give a few more seconds to put your information in that. But in the meantime, Eric, you want to sing for people, or?
I'm putting emoticons in.
Eric's singing. Let me record this.
You don't want to hear it. You've done it. I feel like you've done it in Ansible before.
Yeah.
Like in the microphone.
Better Man, Pearl Jam. Yeah. That's the only one I know.
That's an awesome song, Eric.
Well, I don't think anyone's brave enough to ask a question, so we probably have all the names. Let's call this the line in the sand for raffle entries.
Ooh, I got one more. Hold on, let me write the name down.
More.
Got Raymond. Got in last minute. I'll put Raymond down and all right.
Eric, I'll go ahead and drop, and I do appreciate you guys having me, and I do appreciate everybody attending today. We're Graham and I and Angela are available if you have any questions in the future, and by all means, please feel free to invite us again. Always happy to tell this story.
Awesome. Thank you, Saïd. Great set. Very enjoyable.
Thank you, Saïd. We appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks,
I'm going to do the drawing. This used to be a plant, and I killed it, so I'm drawing names from it instead. So I'm going to go ahead and draw someone for the Apple AirPod Pros. Kevin Latchford.
Kevin, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Wait, is Kevin still in the room?
He is.
Kevin.
Oh, yeah, I see him.
He is.
I was going to laugh if it was Saeed's name.
Oh, I didn't put him in.
He's a CEO.
You caught me at the wrong time.
Oh, no.
He's Ansible Novaing and driving.
Hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop recording, Kevin.
What's up, Kai?